to this week's episode of Live Without Training Wheels. I'm your host, Lynna Sutherland. I'm the owner and author at Homeschooling Without Training Wheels, and I'm also a homeschool mother of 8 kiddos, ages teen to toddler. Tonight, I'm joined by Julie Bogart of Brave Writer, and we will talk to her more and find out more about her and the resources she's going to share with us this evening. I want to do a few quick housekeeping details. First of all, if you are watching from Facebook or from YouTube, we are live streaming from a platform called Crowdcast. So you are welcome to stay there on Facebook or on YouTube to watch, or you can look for the link in the video description and hop on over here into Crowdcast. It's in Crowdcast that we'll be monitoring comments and answering questions. So if you want to participate in the discussion, you'll want to be here in Crowdcast. You're going to be able to view this best through a Chrome browser. And it's best on a desktop or laptop just because it's easier to type and ask questions. But if you're viewing from mobile, that's perfectly fine as well. You'll just want to turn your device into landscape mode, tap the square in the top right corner to go full screen, and then tap view chat, and you'll see everything that we're seeing. There's also a poll at the bottom of the screen. If you look right here underneath on my screen, it's right about under Julie. And I'm curious tonight, for those of you who are here, if you currently have some kind of blog or business or some kind of side hustle. So either yes, no, but I'd like to, or no, and that isn't my thing, which is completely an acceptable answer too. And there's also right below or right next to where it says polls, there's a button that says ask a question. And so at any time this evening, if you've got a question that you'd like Julie to talk about at the end of the show, go ahead and drop your question in there. And it just depends on how many questions we have as to whether we have a chance to get to them all. I think the last time Julie was here, we had a ton of questions. So if you see a question in the ask a question box that looks like you would really like to hear an answer to it by the end of this evening, go ahead and vote for it, because as we see questions that are upvoted, we'll start with those first and make sure that we get to those, because those will be the ones that will be of interest to the most people. So, okay, housekeeping details over. Let's get to the good stuff. Julie, thank you so much for being here with us again. This is Julie's second visit with us. And I invited Julie here because during the month of May, we are hosting a special series called By Moms for Moms. And we're talking specifically with moms who are either currently homeschooling or have been homeschool moms and also working, but not just working. Working is specifically for this month, we're looking at moms who are actually working, serving in the homeschool community, providing support and resources that you use in your homeschool, because I think that's a unique perspective. You know, if we're going to shun the whole idea of working while you're homeschooling, then, you know, where would those moms be who are with us in the trenches, understanding what it's like to be a homeschool mom, and then also providing resources and materials and curriculum and support that we can use because they understand, they get where we are. And Julie, you know, has spoken about this before. I've linked in the show notes to this show a podcast episode that she put out previously called something like Parenting and Making Money or Homeschooling and Making Money. It's in there. The title's right in the show notes. But that was very helpful to me. And so tonight we have the privilege to talk to Julie live and to get her perspective and to be able to answer or ask her our questions about this topic. So Julie, why don't you just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, your kiddos, and how you got started with what we now call Brave Writer.
Great. It's so fun to be here, Lynna, and hello to everyone who's watching. I have 5 adult kids. I homeschooled them for 17 years. I'm in my late 50s, so I've been an adult for a while. And when I first began as a wife and wasn't yet a mother, I was a part of a married couple. And we worked as missionaries at the time. And so I was actively a part of raising financial support for that experience. So very early in my adult life, I did have a sense of financial participation, I guess, in our marriage. And as we went forward from there, we moved back to the States. There was probably a year or two where I didn't have anything specific that I was doing, but I am a freelance writer. And even then I was still writing. I was, writing in a church newsletter. I was writing for La Leche League. I was writing for the Wet Set Gazette, like these just like ridiculous jobs, but they were so meaningful to me. And then I was also spending time honing my craft and submitting book proposals that of course didn't get bought. And so I was growing as a writer. And during that period of time, I stumbled into jobs. I ended up being a freelance ghostwriter, a magazine editor, a contributing writer to several magazines, actually. I worked on helping people get their doctoral dissertations in shape before they would go in and turn those in for their final sort of review. So I had a lot of experience in the professional writing world. And I did do that simultaneous to homeschooling. But the thing about it was, writing is from home. I mean, I did spend maybe an hour a week at a library or 2 hours on a Monday night, sometimes writing. There was a time when I brought in like a mother's helper on a Wednesday afternoon, and I would write and she would play with the kids for 2 hours. But by and large, I was a homeschool mom, and I was doing this other piece, tiny little slice, what I call keeping my foot in the door. Like I just knew that I wanted like a continuation, that homeschooling wasn't going to take up my whole adulthood. So I wanted to know there would be something waiting for me on the other side. So it was that foundation in professional writing that led me to see that there was a contribution I could make in homeschooling. And that's where it came from.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I love what you said about the variety of ways that you were keeping your foot in the door. And I don't know, but it sounds like some of those were paid and some of them weren't paid. So
most of them weren't paid. Most of them weren't paid. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're still, supporting that interest in that hobby, but it wasn't necessarily connected to whether there were dollars involved or not.
No, not during the early years, for sure. I would say I started getting paid for the work I did in about 1995. And that's when I took the ghostwriting job, which led to being a book editor, which led to being a magazine editor. And those sound like bigger jobs than they were. They were in a very small context, like, trade industry publications. It wasn't like Vogue,
Mm-hmm.
So don't picture Red Book or Parenting Magazine. These were small. And I was able to sort of do that from home. My husband at the time was freelance. So we were both freelancing from home. And then he took a job that was a mile from the house. And so he was available. We went through a period, though, where we had, no money. We owned one car, with 5 kids. We lived in a tiny condo in Los Angeles, which was an outrageously expensive place to live. So I want you to get the sense that even when I was getting paid, it was to get by. It wasn't even, seriously, I still relied on my parents for money to buy Christmas presents. That's kind of where we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and you talked a little bit about this already just in your opening intro, but what are some of the ways that you found pockets of time to work on these things?
Yeah. So one way, my husband at the time had me take 2 hours a week on a Monday night, and I would go to a library and book one of their solitary confinement rooms. That's what I called them. They were like soundproof. Yeah. And I love to share that sometimes I just went in there and slept. There were other times when I went in and cried for the whole 2 hours because I was exhausted and unhappy. And then there were other times where I just worked really diligently on writing, and that would be the majority. It was just a place for me to sort of regroup and stay in touch with the Julie part of me, not just the role that I had been given by getting married and having children. Mm-hmm. So we did that for several years. Then I think his schedule changed, and that's when I moved to these like Wednesday afternoons. And I did like 2 hours a week, and I was upstairs, and the mother's helper was like a homeschool mom's daughter that I knew, 12 years old. And she just played with the kids. So if somebody got hurt, I still had to come downstairs and put on the Band-Aid. If somebody was really behaving badly, I would come down and sort of, break up the gang. But at least I didn't have to supervise a toddler. And that was really the goal. I just wanted somebody to make sure that everybody wasn't breaking an arm, because it was hard to concentrate if I knew they were sort of in the house, but no one was looking after them. So that was the beginning. I also was, a fan of working when my kids slept. So before they got up or after they went to bed, depending on the ages, when they were young, it was at night. When they were older and sleeping in the morning, it was the morning. So those were really the main ways. Of course, as Brave Writer has grown over the years, more and more of my time expanded. And there were times when, regrettably, I found myself more excited by the work I was doing than the homeschool I was leading. And when I saw some of that occur, I made really severe decisions. Like I chose not to travel to conferences. I didn't solicit opportunities to speak. I stayed home. I wanted to see my kids play lacrosse. I wanted to go to their band practices. I wanted to actually do the homeschooling, not hire it out to a variety of tutors. That was what I wanted. Everyone solves this problem differently. But for me, I just held back the growth of the business. I did not let it accelerate. One of my most hilarious comments I used to get on the phone all the time until about 5 years ago is, how come I've never heard of you? I'm like, because I've done nothing to make you hear of me. I've let it be completely word of mouth. I didn't buy ads. I didn't go out of my way. I just allowed it to grow at a pace I could manage and still be a homeschooler. And that mattered to me. That was the choice I made.
That was one of the things that I really appreciated about what you shared on the podcast, was that it was really clear, that the focus was still homeschooling. And it wasn't about like how to avoid homeschooling so that you can run off and do the thing that you love. It was about, I know this is such a cliche, but it really was about the balance, and not balance in terms of 50-50, but balance in terms of the right measures of the different pieces of your life that needed to happen to keep, the equilibrium
and everybody has like a different personality. I wouldn't want to like throw any other business model out under the bus, because some families maybe really need the wife to become the chief breadwinner earlier, or maybe the woman is excelling, like, maybe she's really good at this thing she's doing in the business, and the husband would rather be the home educator. What I saw back when I was starting Brave Writer is that most of the businesses were run by men, and the wives were home doing the homeschooling. And the men who were speaking as though they knew about homeschooling. And I think that's what bugged me. I thought, if I'm ever going to have credibility, if I ever even think I have anything to say to homeschoolers, maybe I should homeschool, And the goal wasn't to have anything to say to homeschoolers. That was my original goal at all. I started teaching writing and was sort of delightfully stunned that I could sell classes or write a book that people wanted, because I always wanted to be a writer, but it never was in my mind that writing was going to be around homeschooling. But once I got into the world where people were buying my products, and I could see that there was a market there and it was making a meaningful contribution to our bottom line, well, then I thought, well, if I'm in this world, I don't want to do it the way the men did it. I didn't like that the men were going to 30 conferences in a year, or that they were dragging along their entire family or even one of their kids. I felt like during these 20 years when I had my kids at home with me, I was supposed to be their fan, being dragged to their things. I didn't want to drag them to mine. I figured that was coming. They can be my fan now. But when they were little kids, what I really wanted was to be their fan. And so that's just the decision. That was just my choice, what I wanted to do. I don't regret it, is the point.
Yeah. And it's, it's refreshing, because if you begin to be involved in, whether it's blogging or whether it's, selling a Pampered Chef or something like that you're becoming involved in, a lot of the times the people who are around you giving you advice on how to do that are not helping you to balance, with the homeschooling, especially, or, just other parenting obligations. And kind of makes you feel like more pulled in multiple directions and harder to be content and at peace when you are being with your children and doing the homeschooling.
Yeah. And the other way to manage that balance, which I think is worth mentioning, is I knew right away I had to duplicate myself. I knew that the first month I opened the doors. I started in January 2000. I had just written The Writer's Jungle, and I launched my very first online class. It was $25 for 8 weeks of Julie. And we ran it through email. We didn't even have anything like we have today. And in that class, one of the moms just stood out as a very competent, quality writer and thinker. And at the end of the class, I said to my husband, John, I'm going to hire her to teach for me. And he started laughing. He said, Julie, you've taught one class. How do you know you even have enough money? I said, well, I certainly can't teach them all. Trying to homeschool. If we're going to grow, it can't just be me, or it'll never happen. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, this is loony, but do you want to teach for me? And she said, yes. And I didn't pay her very much because our classes were very cheap, but we were friends. And interestingly, this is, a nice segue into going from, hey, I'm making money on the side to, oh my gosh, I have somebody working for me. I think March of the next year, she sent me an email. Hey, do I get a 1099? I wrote back, what's a 1099? She's like, I made money from you. Don't you have to send me something for taxes? My husband's saying I need something. So I went to the library and I got the carbon copy forms, and I, with a pen, hand wrote her 1099 with, help from the librarian. And so, yeah, a lot of times you make decisions, you don't even know the ramifications, right? You're learning as you go. And
Yes.
I made a million mistakes, by the way. Broke copyright, sold things without the right permissions. I mean, you just don't know. You're just trying. You're just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks.
So I'm just thinking of this as you're talking, but I'm thinking, not only are you doing something that's kind of keeping you alive and fresh and thinking and growing, but it occurs to me that some of the lessons that you learn in business kind of naturally flow downhill to, how you work with your children, like, watching yourself learn by, you're not just saying like, okay, I'm going to go take a bunch of college classes on business. You're like, oh, I need to know how to write a 1099. So I'm going to figure it out.
That is absolutely the truth. And one of the cool things, and I will say this very openly, people who know me know I'm no longer married. But when I was, my husband was really into it. He laid out the writer's jungle. He didn't know anything about PageMaker. And he's like, well, I can learn that. So he just goes and gets a page layout program. This is the 2000s. There was no push button publishing. We had to build the website using the FTP and HTML. And the two of us are just sitting there like racking our brains. How do we make this? How do we build this? And it was an adventure. It was a good shared adventure. He was a writing instructor, so we also had that going on. I used a lot of his books. He was a great sounding board. I felt like I had access to a university through him to get the resources I needed. So yeah, there's a huge, huge learning curve. The big joke in the company that I run now is that I've never been on a job interview, but I'm running a company. I've never worked in a company. I've never been in a corporation. And so I have had to learn everything from scratch. And some of it's not comfortable, to be honest. For instance, when you're a solo entrepreneur, most of the people who do work with you are subcontractors. They're people who are like you. And so there can be this massive camaraderie, mutual support, going ahead and promoting other people's work, even work that competes with yours, because you are just, you're the same. And it shifts when people become employees. So for a while, all of my teachers were 1099s. They were subcontractors. So that means they were teaching a lot of other places in addition to Brave Writer. But it also meant I didn't have control. I couldn't have expectations like you have to reply to the students on a certain time frame, or you need to teach this way, or I require you to go through my training and updated training. I can't do that with a subcontractor. So when I switched over to W-2s, people who are now considered my employees, well, that comes with a whole host of things. We can hold them accountable in ways that we couldn't before. They are prohibited from starting online writing courses while they work for us because their energy is supposed to go towards Brave Writer. So, and they know that going in, it's a non-compete, a conflict of interest clause. In fact, just a few weeks ago, one of my teachers actually wrote to us and said, we give them total permission to teach in person because that's nothing, we don't compete with that. But when it's online, then they're supposed to either notify us or discuss. So I had a teacher ask, we're doing a co-op class, but I'm using Google Docs to distribute all of the forms and to receive submitted essays. Is that a conflict of interest with Brave Writer? Now, see, that was a really wonderful question because it wasn't, but it made me realize that she understood the relationship that she had as an employee. And that's really the bottom line. As you're going through this journey, the things that you understood at one stage morph, and then you have to understand them again. And I've needed legal counsel. I have business consultants. I've taken business, like a 2-day business training for presidents of companies. I mean, we have like 42 employees now. So it's, was my kitchen table and now it's a company, right? So that's just a lot of changes.
So at what point did you say, or did you think of yourself as a working homeschool mom? Because, you know, you and I talked a little bit beforehand, and I still feel like I have this side gig. And when people talk
Yes.
about like working homeschool moms, I'm like, oh, yeah, no, that's not me. But then I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, a little bit I'm working, a little bit there's income, but, you know, when does it transition, or is it just a personal thing?
Probably a personal thing. I don't think I ever put myself in the working mother category while it was a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a day. So we talked before, and I'll share this. One of the things I read very early was The E-Myth, which is a great book, The Entrepreneurial Myth, The E-Myth. I highly recommend that book. And it's all about sort of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And so I knew I was an entrepreneur, like that I understood. And I joined a local group here in Cincinnati for fellow entrepreneurs. And I learned a lot about social media and about the structure of entrepreneurial experience. So I saw myself that way, but it was absolutely a side gig. I mean, I was still thinking of myself as primarily a homeschooling mother who made money on the side. And one of the things I learned early on is that when you don't have money, you take on a side hustle to pay for the extras. So I can trace products back to my son signing up for lacrosse, you know, or wanting to go to Shakespeare camp. I'm like, oh, what could I sell that would pay for that? And there was a day when my income added up and it was more than my husband's.
Wow.
And we got in the car that night. We were going out to dinner. It was right after taxes, and we had just gotten our taxes back. And I had edged him out, you know, not by very much, by a couple $1,000s, but now I earn just a little more than him. And I'm getting chills just remembering this wave of terror hit me. And I got in the car with him and I said, John, you've been carrying the load of paying the mortgage and every earthly need we've had for the last 15 years. And I had no idea what that felt like till today. And now suddenly I just realized I can't quit. Our well-being depends on me keeping this going. It is no longer a side hustle. This is our future. This will be our retirement. This will be college tuition. I almost regretted. Like when I got to that moment, I almost regretted. And then I realized, okay, calm down. There will be a day when you're not homeschooling, and it will be wonderful to have this thing. And I got there. But, you know, we don't always appreciate even what our husbands have been carrying, like what that feels like. It's a real thing. So that's when I know it's a working mom.
So did you ever have any pushback from, like, it doesn't sound like your family, your immediate family was concerned, or maybe they were, but did you ever have any pushback from maybe like the homeschool community? Like, this isn't a cool thing to do while you're also homeschooling? Or
I think, I'm trying to think about that. I mean, I think the time when I probably overdid was when I added grad school. So I had the business, grad school, and homeschooling simultaneously. That was probably when I was stretched the thinnest, but also the business didn't grow during those years. I didn't care about the business growing because I wanted to do grad school. So I managed to balance that. And I think the family handled it pretty well. But I do know that I pushed myself a little bit hard during those years. And so there would be occasional pushback for sure. A child who'd be like, you know, hey, mom, get off the computer, you know, kind of a role reversal where you're always telling your kids to get off. And it was me who needed to get off, you know. John had a big joke that, you know, you had to double click on me to wake me up because I was in my computer sleep mode. Yeah. So if somebody was talking and I didn't respond, he'd be like, hey, double click on her, you know, and then click on me. So I'm not saying that you don't get out of whack. And once you get interested in your own mind life as an adult, that's a very seductive place. And that is partly why I did put some restrictions on how much I let things go, because I did recognize it. But I didn't get pushed back. My mother is a professional writer, and so I was around her being a career person my whole life. And yeah, I think maybe because it was obvious that I was still homeschooling. I mean, I taught at our co-op, like I never missed. I taught every year we were in the co-op, writing, theater. I was involved in social relationships. My family had me. I mean, I went to everything they were ever in. I didn't miss things. So not to like break my arm patting myself on the back, because there are plenty of times when I'm sure that there was a day of neglect, or, I didn't do as good a job as I could have. But I don't know. I feel good about how I homeschooled. I have good feelings about that.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's take it more in a theoretical direction then, because we talked about this right before we started the show, but you just had a couple of conversations in your Instagram stories that I was thinking like, wow, we couldn't have engineered this better if we'd coordinated. I wish I could say I coordinated, but this is all Julie. So one of them was a mom who had written and asked you a question, and then you put it out there anonymously, for folks to discuss. And it was something along the lines of like, what if you're having this time for yourself to do something and you're feeling like your husband might be resentful about that?
Yes. So interestingly, I will share a little bit personally here. So a lot of times when a woman asserts herself, so I think back to my mother, this is the 1970s, she's just ratcheting up her career. She goes out and she sells this really cute article, her very first article, A Trail of Tips for Young Hikers in Boy's Life magazine, right? She made $20 and then, laminated it on a plaque for $25. So she was already $5 in the hole, right? After she sold her first article. Very adorable. It still hangs on her wall. What did my dad do? He writes into Reader's Digest and submits a Life in these United States humor piece that they buy for $100, like the following month. What a crummy thing to do. I mean, really, it was so the opposite of support. It was so kind of showing my mom that he made the real money and she didn't. And I sound like I'm throwing my dad under the bus. My dad's awesome. I love my dad. This is the 1970s when men did dumb things that they regret now. So I'm sure he would not do that now. But what I'm saying is sometimes it's just a person not being willing to adjust to a woman's growth. And in the homeschool environment, women who homeschool are very much in a traditional looking role. And when everyone gets used to that and gets comfortable with that, when you stand up and say, actually, there's a little more to me, there's this other thing going on, it's disruptive. So we have to retrain all the people in our lives to recognize that our being disruptive is inconvenient to them. It doesn't make it wrong for us, right? So that's the key. So if you've got this husband who's saying, oh, but you're not making dinner. I remember John making some comment. I always took Sundays off and never made food for anyone on a Sunday. He would, perennially say, but we're all hungry. I'm like, right. Experience hunger. Motivate yourself to make a meal. It isn't on us to save them from their discomfort with our choices. It's for us to be responsible with the choices we make. And then to be as faithful as we can to them, and then to apologize if we overextend. I mean, it's that cycle. Now, if you have a husband who bullies you for lots of things, this is just one more front for the battle. It has nothing to do with working. It's just another way to get at you. And that's a whole other level. And that needs to be addressed.
And I saw a couple of moms who responded to that question by saying, I thought that my husband was feeling resentful about me doing something. But then when I talked to him, he said no. So it was really like me putting this guilt burden on myself,
Definitely.
just kind of like imagining him being resentful. But he, actually was fine with it. Yeah.
That's actually a great point. A lot of times we use other people, our opinion of what we think other people are saying, as a way to stay safe and to not take the risk. So if we can say, well, I don't think he'd be okay with it, then we don't really have to face whether or not to do it. Right. So that's a very, very astute point, Lena.
Yeah, that was a fantastic discussion. I always love when you ask things that get moms, to share and respond. And I also like a little while later, you asked the question, I think it was something like, how do you find time for other hobbies or for working or something? And, there were a whole variety of responses, but somebody, at least a couple of moms said basically like, I'm not right now, but I'm okay with that. And I thought that was important to hear too.
Totally. And to make decisions, I think one of the hardest things to do, and I'm in this state right now, so it's an interesting opportunity. So Brave Writer has been growing sort of by leaps and bounds ever since my kids all left home, because I have more time. I can invest more. I have some experience now. I kind of know where I want it to go. But interestingly, in the last 2 years, we've actually been in a stabilizing period And I even just told my consultants, I'm not interested in growing a lot this year either. I'm trying to actually lay a foundation for a company that will outlive me. And that takes investing. You know, before we came on the air, you talked about how do you know if an investment you're making is paying off? Like if I subscribe to a service or if I make an investment. So let me give you a classic example of a massive investment I made. So for years, we ran our classes first on email. Then we moved to a discussion board software that was free. Then we moved to one that cost about $200 a year, which at the time, oh, it sounded so expensive. Then we moved to one that was like $1,000 a year. And I thought, you know, it's no longer serving. So I started looking around in this landscape for somebody who could custom build something for me. And we got a proposal back that was like $8,000. And I knew I couldn't afford it. So I turned it down. But interestingly, because I didn't do it at that level, like 3 years later, it cost me 3 times that to do the thing that I didn't do then. But you know what? That investment, as scary as it was, and it came the same year I was getting a divorce, it's the only time I've ever gone into any debt, was the difference maker. It like changed the trajectory of how we did our classes. And I've made all of that back and more. And we paid off the loan in 2 years and we were fine. Women are afraid to take financial risks. They show it in all the data. It's why microloans work so well with women, because women are fiscally responsible as a group. They do not pay to play. I started my company and the only investment we made was moving from dial-up to cable. And it took me a month to make that decision. I wasn't sure it was a good decision. And that was my whole investment. You know, I have been so careful, so cash basis, but sometimes it's worth it to recognize that you can reel out a little bit, take a little bit of a financial risk, see what happens. And even if it was a miscalculation, you're going to learn something really important. And it's pretty unlikely as a homeschooling mother, woman personality that you're going to be reckless. It's just not really in the DNA of home educators. So, you know, if I could be a voice saying, don't be afraid to try a few things, maybe even make like a throwaway budget where you say, okay, out of the year's earnings, I'm going to take 10% and invest it in something next year and just see what that's going to mean for us. And the way to track return on investment can't be one-to-one. So you don't say, okay, I'm going to subscribe to Zoom for this conference software and then only measure it by people who sign up for Zoom or sign up for your platform. If you are expanding your brand, like you're on Facebook, you're on Crowdcast, whatever you're doing, it is the reach that is part of the investment. It's exposure. It's becoming known. You know, if they don't know about you, they're never going to try your thing. And it may take them a year of knowing you before they'll buy your thing.
Yeah. So it's not all black and white flowchart. Plus,
no, and it's certainly not one-to-one, like you invested this month and you should see it next month. You have to give things a little bit of time to grow.
Well, Julie, let's hop into some of these questions because there's already 3 here. I think folks have asked some really good ones. Before we jump into the questions, I'm just going to really quick pop up the little green button at the bottom of the screen. I know you've probably noticed Julie's nice banner behind her, the Brave Learner. If you have not already checked that out, you're definitely going to want to take a look at it. That's her latest adventure. And we were talking before the show about how the response has been to that. And even moms who are not homeschooling saying like, this is a great resource for anybody just to think about how we learn and how we come into contact and interact with information. So if you're interested in that, you can click that green button and hop on over to find out more about the Brave Learner. All right. So Julie, Paula says, I just feel so overwhelmed to even start. I get so paralyzed and a bit alone in all this. What could I do to get unstuck? Sounds like she's talking about starting to do maybe a side hustle kind of thing. Right.
So I remember there was a time when I used to play guitar and I liked writing songs. And for some reason, I didn't realize that I was ever going to make money doing my actual writing. And so I had this notion, maybe I'll be a songwriter. This is a really funny story. So I started writing these songs, and I went to this guy I knew because I was working in the music industry. The magazine I edited was in the music industry. So I went to one of the musicians, and I said, I want to play you this song. Is it any good? I just need to know, because if it's not, I just need to stop. So I finished the song, and he says to me, well, it is a song. A lot of people come to me and they play me something they think is a song, and it's not a song. You at least wrote a song. He said the only way to know if that song is any good is to play it for other people and see if they will sing it, if they want to sing it. You need to actually be with a group, teach them your song, and see if they will sing it. And then you need to see them a week later and see if they want to sing it again. And interestingly, that has stayed with me. No matter what you do, whether it's writing a book, making a quilt, designing a tea, whatever it is that you do, you have to put some version of it out there for free. And you got to find out if the people that you gave it to want it or want more of it. And what I found in Brave Writer, the way Brave Writer started is I did a free writing class. It was Sunday school, I think, at our church. One of my friends asked me to do it. It wasn't even my idea. And I just started sharing for free. Then I started sharing online in all these discussion boards, email lists for free. Then I started speaking at events for free. Then I taught at our co-op for free. This went on for years. And the reason that that was so necessary is I was getting all the information I needed about what I eventually could produce that would even help anybody. So take it real small. And as I always say, give it all away and see who's asking for more. Go back and ask them, did this serve you? By the way, no one wanted any song I wrote, never wanted to sing it again. So I put away my guitar.
And you took your pen out.
I took my keyboard.
Keyboard, there you go.
Right.
All right. That is a great answer. So Betsy says, me too, Paula. Paula, maybe we need to join forces. I need baby steps.
I think it's awesome if you have friends to talk to. And one of the things that's been lonely for me over the years is that I didn't have a community of homeschool entrepreneurs to turn to. Part of it was a religious restriction. I just got excluded from a lot of groups that were specific about their sort of statements of faith. So I wasn't a part of that community. I did not travel, so I didn't get to know vendors. And so I was in kind of a limited space. So what I did is I joined a local social media entrepreneur networking group. I was the only homeschooler there. They all thought it was like, they're like, so what's your business? I'd say homeschool writing. And they'd say, how did you think of that? Because they were entrepreneurs. Like, we're just looking for businesses, to turn over. And to this day, weirdly, I'm the last one standing. They all went off and started working for companies, and I'm the only one who's still running my own thing. So that's kind of funny. But that's another way. Like, if you don't have homeschoolers, see if there's something happening in your city that is for networking. There are women's groups like National Association of Women's Business Owners. There's Elevate. I mean, there are a lot. Maybe even your YWCA will have something. There are ways to get in contact with other business owners.
Yeah, so that goes actually right along with Paula's next question. She says, how do you find a business consultant?
Oh, that's a great question. I found that really challenging, by the way. And the way I actually found one was through a relationship I formed in that social networking group, that entrepreneur group. So someone referred me to this course for presidents that's in Dayton, Ohio. And I took that course, and they assigned me with a consultant who I kept on, and then he referred me to another one. But I did do some research, like you can go through your Chamber of Commerce, or you can find one of these women's business organizations. National Association of Women's Business Owners is phenomenal. I joined last year. I went to their conference in Spokane in September, and they have chapters all over the country, and they are all about helping women start. And I mean, some of the women I met, they'd made $1,000 that year. Like, that is, they start with people who are at a very small level. They're not needing you to be making $1 million a year before you join this group.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, it depends on, you were talking about a business consultant that would help you to learn how to be the president of a company with 42 people. But, sometimes what you need is somebody who can just help you get up and running or.
Completely. And of course, listening to podcasts is great. One of my favorite ones is Smart Passive Income, which is by Pat Flynn.
Yep.
And he's really great at even showcasing people who are making small amounts of money, but are having success using his principles. And of course, there's a whole internet marketing thing out there. My brother was an internet marketer in the very early years, so I got some good counsel from him. So those kinds of conferences exist as well, but following people who do that stuff is helpful. I will say this though, and I have to say it because I've also received a lot of bad advice. Don't just follow someone because they are running a business that helps businesses. Follow someone who had a business that had nothing to do with business, who then became a consultant for businesses. There is just a plethora of help out there from people who only make money off of people trying to run a business. And that's the only thing they've ever sold. And I find those people kind of useless because I feel manipulated when I'm in their presence. And what we really want is somebody who sold a widget, for 20 years. And then they tell you how they sold that widget. That is a person I want to listen to.
Right. Because the business to business marketing, that it's a little unfair. They're not selling to, the average homeschool mom or the average, mom at home. They're selling to businesses who have business income to invest. And so when they put out their reports and, oh yeah, I made thousands of dollars my first month out of the door. Well, yeah, because you're selling to businesses.
And they aren't experienced in some of the product development research. Everything they're doing is to a very hungry market, the people who want to make money. They're not trying to understand, how do you market to a customer who is, in the homeschool market, has limited income, single income families are really common, who have certain standards. I mean, one of the things about my business, and maybe Paula's even feeling this, you wonder, do I even have the credentials to speak? I mean, I don't have an education degree. My college degree was in history. Why do I have the authority to tell parents how to teach writing to their kids? These are really important questions. And I had to overcome some of that. I had to learn more. I had to be a student. I had to go back and think about, what do I bring to the table that's unique? And why is it unique? And why am I qualified to say what I'm saying? Sometimes when I'm looking at the landscape of what's out there, and I was just at a convention series with a lot of vendors, most people, they're just throwing it against the wall to see what sticks. Don't be afraid to vet the curriculum creators. My ex-husband worked in a textbook company, and I was sort of appalled to see who they hired to write textbooks. I always thought it was people with PhDs, in a program. No, it's just garden variety writers using Wikipedia. I mean, so figuring out what you have to offer, why you should be the one to offer it. What is your value proposition? What are you offering? And why are you the one to offer it? It's really important. That's an important piece of this.
Love that. Okay, so total side comment, but I now feel even more empowered as a homeschool mom to decide what I want to do and don't want to do out of a textbook.
Totally true. I hope you feel that way. I was on this Charlotte Mason steering committee here in Dayton, Ohio, during the time when John was working in the textbook company. And the whole time I'm like, Charlotte knew, she knew, these textbooks were a joke. John would come home and he'd be like, keep reading good literature. This stuff is a joke. I mean, really, so funny.
Yeah, love it. Okay, here's a great one. Betsy says, I have a passion to encourage homeschool moms and help them to fine tune their homeschool curriculums, schedules, routines, etc. I do this all the time for friends and Facebook friends around the country. Sometimes I do this for several hours in a week, but how do I make the leap?
So is the leap to asking people to pay you for it? Is that the leap, do you think?
That's what I'm guessing. That's what it sounds like. Betsy, if you want to give us more details, feel free to let us know, but let's go in that direction.
What I would say is this. You make the leap just by asking, but just keep the price low to the first group. So you've done all this. I would count up how many people you've helped for free. And then I would put it out in your community, whether it's through Facebook or a website or your Instagram account, and just say, I've been able to help 50 people plan their homeschools, and I'm good at it. And I want to offer it to people who don't know me personally for this, price of $20. And here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that I help you and that you help me make this a better product. And that's why I can offer it for this low of a price.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote The Writer's Jungle, I actually recruited 40 families and I gave them writing help while they did my practices and read my book and gave me feedback. And that was a free exchange. It was that experience that made me realize I could do online classes. That had never occurred to me. So the very first class I did, I marketed it only through Sunlight on their discussion board. I'm like, hey, join my email list for $25 and I'll teach you for 8 weeks. And it filled up because people knew me on those boards as giving really good advice. So
yeah, cool.
That's how it works. You start with the free, you get known a little bit, and then you charge a really reasonable price and test it on your group and ask really good questions like what worked, what didn't. Don't get your feelings hurt. Just grow, 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 grow.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully, I mean, maybe Betsy already has some of this, but, you know, some folks who'd be willing to, you know, say, yeah, this is where I was. This is what Betsy helped me with. And this is what, you know, made a difference and how it looks different on the other side. Some, you know, testimonial type.
Definitely testimonials are important. Yep. Always gather those. In fact, keep a file if you have one. I have a file in Gmail called positive comments, and I put all positive comments there. It's also helpful on those days when you don't get positive comments to be reminded, oh yeah, no, I have done some things right.
Mm-hmm.
There will be hard days. Business is hard. You'll make some big mistakes. It's unavoidable.
So Betsy says, I should say I do this for free. I host a homeschool encouragement group as well. So yeah, so you've got right there, you've got a little cluster of folks who you could go to for exactly that kind of exchange Julie was talking about.
Yep.
Okay, Paula says, my other problem is my selling-itis, allergy to selling, closing, charging, all those words I can create, but how can I become a good gulp salesperson?
So yeah, selling is its own thing, you know, being able to market yourself. So treat it like any other skill that you've ever wanted. You just have to learn it as a skill. One of the hurdles for a lot of women is just getting over the worthiness thing. Like they should only be generous. They should never expect people to pay them. They should be doing it as a sense of mission as opposed to a sense of, you know, monetization. And all I can say is we live still in a capitalist society. You deserve to be paid for the work that you do as much as your husband does. Can you imagine if he came home and said to you, you know, I just feel weird getting paid to go in and be an engineer. I feel like I should just serve. I'm good at this. And it's awkward that they give me a paycheck. We don't think about it in those terms, but it's exactly the same. The hours that you use should be paying you in some way. So if I'm homeschooling, I'm being paid by the sense that my children are getting the education I want them to have. That is a payday for me. If I am investing in my friendships and spending 2 hours, there is a return on that investment. I feel uplifted. I feel supported. If I am producing a product and someone is benefiting from it, the exchange rate is money. That's how it works in our society. So it's all the same. You're getting paid in lots of ways. And if you want it to be a ministry or a gift, that's fine. But I'm here to tell you there may be a day when you are resentful. So the day that it shifts over to resentment is the day you need to start charging.
Well, and Paula, you know, just two thoughts that I've had to wrestle through with this too. One is people use what they pay for. So, you know, true. I have resources that I have given away for free. And I've watched the people who get it for free never do anything with it. And the people who've paid for it use it. So if you have something that's a help to someone, you don't just want them to have it somewhere on their hard drive or, you know, in a drawer somewhere. You want them to use it because that's what's going to help them is the actual using of it. And so requiring them to put down some money is what will incentivize them to make use of it and to actually get the benefit that you wanted them to get out of it. And two, you know, even in tiny ways, I've already seen this for myself, that when you charge a fair price for something, that enables you to continue doing what you're doing. Like it's not sustainable to give away for free, or even if it's sustainable, you're going to be very limited in what you can do. So, you know, when you charge for something, that actually enables you to serve the person whom you can serve to a higher degree, better and more efficiently. I used to never read productivity books because I always thought they were about like squeezing optimal efficiency out of every moment of your day. And that sounded about as fun as slow death by strangulation. And I didn't really want that. But when I read, a couple that friends had recommended, I realized it's not about like being super busy every second. It's about intentionality and thinking about like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending time on that? And that goes back to just what Julie said, which is like, so it's good to help people. But what if I could help people in a way that would then multiply into being able to help more people instead of just like, well, that was an hour spent helping one person and that hour's gone and I can't, I'd have to spend another hour to help another person instead of like creating a product that you could sell. And now you've spent an hour and it's going to be able to help many, many, many people who, could take advantage of that.
That's so true. And you'll notice that your own sense of self-esteem increases when someone pays you, because if you are only giving it away, it stays in the favor exchange rate. And so what ends up happening is people start taking advantage. I mean, this even happens when you're charging people, but I noticed when I first moved to Ohio is when I started working on Brave Writer. And so everybody here knew me as a person who had a company, whereas my friends in California didn't. And so my California friends never bought my product, didn't want to take my classes because they didn't think of me that way. Even though I had taught all their kids to write, I used to read their kids writing for them. But when it turned into a business, that group couldn't see me that way. But when I moved here, this whole group saw me that way. Nobody ever thought, oh, I shouldn't pay Julie for this. So if part of the thing that's going on for you is that these are all your friends and you're afraid to charge them, you just need different customers. You might not be able to charge your best friend. So you have to start expanding your base so that it's people who see you as a business, not as their friend who did them a favor.
Yep to all of that.
I mean, we've all been on the receiving end of Amway or Mary Kay or Tupperware when a friend is trying to get you to come and it's awkward. You're like, well, I know she needs money, so maybe I'll go and buy, one bowl. And then she's resentful because you took a whole seat and all you did was buy one bowl. And there's this awkwardness because of friendship. So your customers should not be your friends. Your customers need to be people who need your product. And I love what you said, Lynn, about pricing it. You want to price it in such a way that they're motivated to use it. So if you price it too low, they'll put it on a shelf or in a drawer or in a hard drive. And then when people ask them about it, this is what they say. Oh, I have that, but I've never used it, which is the identical thing to a negative review.
Yep.
You don't ever want that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's like, the couple that put a couch out by their front, curb and said it's free. And a week went by and nobody took it. And then they put a sign on it that said $10 and someone stole it because suddenly it had value.
Oh, how funny. That's amazing.
I got rid of it.
Story. That's great.
I don't remember where I heard that, but it's always impressed me that if you give something a perceived value, then people will value it and they will.
That's right.
Hopefully not steal it. I mean, that's not the moral of the story, but anyway.
Okay,
so here's a great question from Paula. She says, are there any good books on selling that are more female oriented? That's interesting. I've never thought about that.
There are books for female entrepreneurs. It's interesting, though. I don't know if I've read any. The book I'm reading right now is The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and that's a Silicon Valley book. And of course, all I'm watching is Silicon Valley on HBO because, hello, it's just wonderful. It's amazing. I feel like I've been through every stage only on a micro level because I'm not dealing in the billions of dollars. But I would say I don't have anything to recommend off the top of my head. What I would do, though, I would start with the E-Myth. I think that's a fantastic book. It's really short. The 1 Minute Manager isn't too bad either, but the E-Myth is really, really good. It's very short. I'm looking on my shelf to see what else I have that would be good for business. Lynna, I'll do some looking and I'll give you a list later if I can give you some. I know I've read other books. I just not accessing them.
Yeah, Julie can send me later and I'll add them to the show notes and let you guys know when they're available so you can access those resources. Great. Okay. Yeah. Betsy says she already has some testimonials that she can use. So that's great.
Good. Awesome. So, and don't give up. It's possible that you will have no one respond at the beginning, but just don't give up. There's so many ways. Offer yourself. I keep blogging, keep getting good at honing your message, take the feedback. And like I said, I tried to go down the, two things I tried to do. I tried to make baby blankets. I thought I was going to sell them. And then I thought I was going to be a songwriter. And I am not doing either of those. So, find out if the thing you want to do is the thing that you really are meant to do too. Sometimes we undervalue the thing we're good at and we think we're supposed to do this other thing. So, pay attention to that people are always saying, oh, I wish you would fill in the blank. Take my senior photos, redecorate my home, make me the best meals, teach my child math. Like when you hear people say, oh, I wish you would, they're probably talking about one of your strengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Great. I love that. Well, Julie, thanks. Wow. This has been and the questions have made this such a dynamic exchange. Thank you guys who are here for those. That's the most fun when we have interaction like that. So Julie, thank you for taking time and coming to share this. And guys, seriously, if you don't already follow Julie on Instagram, I would, at Julie Brave Writer. Yeah. And like I said, there are often good discussions in her Instagram stories or posts about, a whole manner of things, but not just like, oh, what curriculum should I buy for blah, 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 but just the whole, the holistic life of the homeschool mom, that's why I titled this show From Writing Resource to Lifestyle, because now when people say Brave Writer, they don't just mean like, oh yeah, a PDF that you get. It's a much bigger idea.
Yeah. So. Thank you, Lynna. This is so fun. I don't get to talk about business very much, and it's so dominating in my life right now that it feels really good to have this conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad that the timing of this worked out. Betsy says, "Thank you, ladies. You're both wonderful." Karen says, "Thank you both. You're two of my homeschool heroes." And Karen is going to be on with us in 2 weeks. So Karen and her sister Michelle talking about layers of learning. So, and all of the.
I'm going to have to listen to that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. So, okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, it's going to be just me, and I'm just going to talk. We're going to kind of continue the conversation, but it's just going to be me. And I think I'm going to title the show something like, Is There Life Beyond Homeschooling or Outside of Homeschooling or something like that. So join me back next week for that discussion. And then we've got Karen and Michelle the week after that. And the last week in May, we've got Pam Barnhill, who's going to be on discussing business. And I'm pretty sure we can get some planning tips from her. That's kind of her wheelhouse there. So
that's her jam.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Paula. Thanks for joining us.